Hello, brothers. My name is Doug Draper. I'm a 1992 graduate from the University of Kansas, and I'd like to welcome you to On the Banks. On the Banks is the only fraternity podcast where we meet brothers, share stories, and embrace the shared values of Phi Gamma Delta. So we're excited about today's show. It's amazing. Not often do I get to use the term Renaissance man, but we certainly have one today. So I'd like to welcome Sonnie Wooden to the show. Sonnie, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I went to the gym this morning, so I'm still trying to stay healthy as possible. So
Yes, there you go.
wear my mask in the gym because they tell me to. So I'm just taking it day by day. But I'm here with the boys, so it's good to be here. Yeah.
Cool. You look a little buff than last time I saw you. So the gym is working out for you.
I mean, yeah, I got over it. Like, I used to run a lot, and I was like, I'm over this. Like, I'm going to the gym all the time. So, yeah, I've always been a big dude. I was a football player for like 7 years and stuff. So,
right,
I had to like get back under the weights. It feels good.
Nice. Well, before we dive into it, I'd like to talk to our audience and our brothers a little bit about yourself and kind of why we use the term, or why you and I decided to use the term Renaissance man, because your family and your origins are from West Side Chicago. You're a University of Iowa graduate. Here's the cool thing: you have a master's of fine arts degree from University of Pennsylvania. You're a painter, you're a sculptor, you're a writer. You've put a couple of films together, and you have a true entrepreneurial spirit for sure. And with that spirit comes along the ability to talk about all kinds of topics, some of which are a little hard to get out there and talk in this day and age as a young college 18 to 22-year-old. But we'll get into that shortly. So all those cool things that you are, Sonnie, one of the things that I'm most proud about is to be able to call you a brother in the fraternity. And I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So, hey, we're just going to jump into this thing a little hardcore. So I'm just going to ask the question, right? So, so you're a black guy from the Chicago suburbs, and you landed up in a fraternity in the Farm Belt of America. That seems like a pretty crazy line to move from point A to point B. So why did you decide to do that? And maybe start off with some of your backstory, which could potentially help us understand and navigate that line.
Yeah, we can start at high school. So K through 8, I went to this school called Hillside, which is next to Proviso West High School. I was like overweight. I was fat. I wore glasses. I had a gap. Like, I was bullied, but I played football a lot. So I played football like from like 3rd grade to like 7th grade or something like that, off and on. I used to do like martial arts and stuff. So I love being athletic, and I was like kind of good. Like my team in 7th grade went to like nationals for like football, and I was like getting like recruited, in the high school way. It's like, hey, we'll give you half scholarship, you come play football here. But it's like private school. Like Isaiah Thomas went to St. Joe's. I was like looking there. But my family actually got a divorce, which kind of helped me. And they were like, you're too sensitive. You're not gonna do well at Proviso West. It's too rough. So they split, and my mom moved to Oak Park, and like I went to Oak Park River Forest High School because she lived there, and we lived on the street called Austin, which is the dividing line between West Side Chicago and Oak Park. And through that experience, I still played football, blew my shoulder out. Like 12 dislocations later, I officially stopped, had the surgery, didn't work. So I'm like, all right, whatever, swam. And then there was this cute girl that I liked in my Spanish class, and she was a rower, like an oarsman. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna join this thing. And like, I really liked the word regatta. It was part of a lexicon that I've never even heard of like boating, and my family's super working class. I've been very like what my friends and I would sometimes call hood adjacent. I would spend a lot of time in the hood, but my address wasn't there. And I just kind of developed this kind of like working class like rigor, and then also this like understanding of like street etiquette and manners that many people don't have. And then I went on to college. I won state in rowing, so I went to row in college. Wasn't tall enough. I'm only 5'7", so wasn't good. Wasn't happening. But what is it like even before then, it's like, what is a black dude whose family's from the inner city, first generation, doing on a like an Ivy League rowing like high performance team that like all my friends were going to like Princeton and Cornell and University of Delaware, like all these like coastal universities. And I was on my way to Ithaca, but I made the pivot and went to Miami of Ohio. And when I went to Miami of Ohio, I actually wanted to rush there, but they had second semester rush. But it was just so like violently racist. And I went there during the Obama re-election of 12. And like my third day on campus, like I was walking uptown to like Brick Street or something, and someone called me a nigger out of their car, and I was like, oh, this is precedence. This might be precedence to more. And then people were like drawing monkeys and like there were like nooses around campus and stuff, and like that's just how Miami of Ohio works. I was like, all right, I got to get out of here. So went to DePaul, went to study music. My dad and I both have synesthesia, so I wanted to do something with this like understanding of music that I have innately. I'm not a classically trained musician. They didn't take me, dropped out, waited like 6 months, went to Columbia College of Chicago, built a portfolio there, made some great people. Used to take fashion courses like sewing my own clothes. I used to make like blazers and like skirts for women. Got like a 98% in like sewing, it was incredible. It was very fun, but they didn't have like fashion for men, and I hated that. And then I was like, hey, like I'm looking around corners down the way, and I'm like, the art, like the fashion, men's fashion is gonna be like a $60 billion industry. Like we need to have classes for that. Like I want to make men's fashion. I'm a male. Like I want to do this, and they told me no. So when people tell me no, I say okay. Wait, how strong of a language can I use here?
Medium to let's just keep it medium. How's about that?
Okay.
Appreciate you asking. Good call. Good call.
Yeah. So they were like, yeah, you can't do that. So when people tell me I can't do something, I'm like, okay, okay, good. So I transferred out of there to a better art school, which is School of Art Institute of Chicago. Very conceptual, very rigorous. Studied there for a few years, for a year actually. And I did painting, I did photo, and I did design. In my design courses, I came up with like Amazon lockers in 2014, where I was just like, all right, Bike Messenger drops off your package here. You can go do it. It decentralizes like your packages away from your house. You can just go pick them up. My professor told me that was a stupid idea. Many years later, it's looked like it works. So to my brothers, it's like, well, sometimes you don't listen to people. But then, but then my mom ended up leaving to take a job at Bank of America in Georgia. We were in a rough patch, so she left. And then like a couple weeks later, around my birthday in 2015, you can like look this up on the internet. I met Kanye and I cried to him about like trying to get out of Chicago. And growing up in Chicago, like the Black artist of choice was like Kanye for me, like kind of nerdy, kind of weird. No one understood him. And I was like, okay, like I gotta ask him this question, like, how do I get out of here? And he was like, I'm speechless. I don't know what to tell you. And at that moment, I was like, oh no, my idol can't tell me anything. And it was like my idol's fall from grace. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. And then a week later, a really great family friend, he died by suicide. And I was there like 2 hours before he died. And then I went to the hospital, where everything, where they signed paperwork, we saw him there and, lived with them for 2 weeks. It was a long process. So at that point I was like, the violence in Chicago is escalating. It's the summer. When it gets hot in Chicago, it gets kind of crazy. I was like, I got to get out of here. A friend just died. My mom's gone. I need to get out. So I left and I went to Iowa. And I always wanted to go to Iowa, even when I was at Miami of Ohio. There was a man named Dave Mallet who used to like take all my like credentials to transfer, and I ended up like not going. And I got to Iowa and I said I need support. And my friend who passed away actually was a Sit Chi at Miami of Ohio, which is like the Alpha chapter, and I was going to be part of that, or attempt to be part of that. And next thing I know, I get to Iowa. I said I'm gonna respect him and like not do Sit Chi because I don't know his relationship with that before he passed. I looked at Phi Delta, it wasn't a thing, and then I met some Fiji guys at some Rush events, and I was like, okay, these guys are trying to build something, and the thing I've always been is the underdog. So for me, I was like, all right, Phi, no one gave me a bid, but but Fiji, And I said, well, now I got to go after everybody. So then, and that's just how I worked. So
Right.
we ended up making the fraternity one of the best on campus, in my time there. And that's just how I
Yeah.
operate,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's quite a line. I didn't realize. I thought it was Chicago down to Iowa. So I appreciate you giving us that
Mm.
backstory, and that's really cool. You embraced the fraternity and saw that there was an opportunity to kind of take it to the next level, and um, your background is you get stuff done. Come in there and you shake it up and you make it happen. So that's good.
Well, I'm a
Um,
worker. Like I love Iowa. It's one of my favorite states next to Wyoming, which is
yeah,
really funny.
yeah. Well, you'll have to swing through Kansas sometime because there's a lot of similarities between those three states.
I was telling you, I was almost a Jayhawk. Like I
Yeah.
visited this, I loved it.
I do remember that. Yeah, we had a funny story about all the people that from Chicago come down to Lawrence and then head back up.
Oh,
So,
of course, yeah.
one of the things that we spoke about at the beginning of the show is topics that are sometimes difficult to discuss openly with the college generation, 18 to 22, and even more specifically with fraternity and Greek life. Let's talk a little bit about the mental health. I know that mental health challenges and experiences have been part of you, around you, and impacted you,
Yeah.
your entire life. And you made mention of it just a minute ago with one of your good friends. So, what's your thoughts about mental health in college and the fraternity experience? It's always been kind of a faux pas topic, but I think
Mhm.
it's a new generation and people are more willing to talk about it. So
Mhm.
what's your take on that with the college environment? Are people embracing it? What are the pros with how things are in 2021?
Well, I think a lot of these things around mental health stem from, you know, maybe adolescence in some ways, but definitely high school. And to like just be honest, like what is a fraternity made of? It's like usually a
Hmm.
bunch of white straight dudes from like suburbs who have enough disposable income to throw into like a quasi country club in a campus, right? And most of the reason they do that is because it's a way to be around your similar class, and like that's fine. That's totally understood. But also it's about camaraderie, I will say. It's about brotherhood. It is about those things too. So growing up, a lot of people feel like they have to be this kind of normal. It's like normality is like the root of like a lot of issues. And I saw it in my fraternity. I saw it in other people's fraternities, and you can kind of see them all kind of like gel into one thing. But
Hmm.
I think at least for me, like my like mental health issues were always there. They were just glaring. But the only thing I did differently than anyone else was go to therapy. When people were like laughing about it, where I would talk to some of my like Irish Catholic Irish Catholic friends, or some of my other like Christian friends, and it's like you pray, you go for a walk, or you go to confessional, and I'm like, logically, if you broke your arm, would you go to confessional and be like, like this is what I was doing before I broke my arm? Or you're gonna go to like someone else, right? You're gonna be honest with yourself. And what I did was honest with myself, like I have to like get treatment, you know? Like I was like, I have to treat this as I would treat my arm or my leg or my back, and go talk to someone. And in the fraternity, I just saw like this idea of being like masculine that was very like perverse in a lot of ways. Like they felt the need to be masculine. And I'm like, well, you are masculine. You can be masculine, right? But the thing that I had the kind of ability to do was like, as a black dude, people see me as overly masculine, right? Like super like, tough, and like, they look at like black culture through like the lens of rap, and they're like, oh, those dudes are tough, like, they're super
Hmm.
masculine. But the thing that afforded me was like a kind of cool, right? So I was like, the only thing I tried to do was rebrand therapy and rebrand mental health, like while I was on campus, as like, the cool black dude isn't going to therapy, so maybe we all should.
Right.
We should all talk about these things, because if I can, right, which is like, I come from like, stereotypically what people say, like the most hardened people in America. And if I'm going to therapy and y'all not going to therapy, there's an issue there. So I just tried to make it as obvious as possible that like you can do this, be okay, and it doesn't make you any less of a man, right? And I think a lot of people feel like they have to be a kind of man because of legacy, because of, fathers and uncles and things like that. But like, you don't have to do that. I just never understood it. It just didn't make any logical sense to me to be like, I must be this way and handle these things this way, as if
Hmm.
there's only one way to do these things. But then you see like post grad, people, you know, they come out and they talk about these issues that they were dealing with the entire time they're in a fraternity, or people who are coming out, as gay or bi or trans, whatever it may be, from the same exact system that is like overly masculine at times. And
Hmm.
and my question has always been, what is happening within that infrastructure, or within that with under in that infrastructure, or within that framework or structure, or whatever kind of architecture that it may be, that is allowing people, or not even allowing them, but like restricting themselves, like them as like like their self, identity. And a lot of that comes from like, proximity to a kind of like understanding of the world, and a fear that if you divert from that, you're no longer XYZ. And
Hmm.
for me,
Yeah.
as a black dude in Iowa already, they don't know what to do with me. So it's like I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. Well, I like the analogy of a limb, an arm being broken, and saying you wouldn't go to a confessional if you're in pain and your arm needs to be addressed. Like you said, same
Yeah.
thing with mental health. Let me ask you this. So, do you think I don't want to say severity because that's the wrong word. Maybe prevalence is greater now as far as mental health challenges and some of the stresses that are put on college kids. Do you think that has grown with social media and the FOMO and all that kind of stuff? Do you think it's increased? Do you think there's external factors in the world that have pushed more buttons, or do you think it's always there, or always been there in some level, and young men and women are just more comfortable with sharing some of their challenges? So it's kind of a long question, but do you think it's always been there, or do you think there's external forces just in the world right now that are making it more prevalent?
I think these things have always been there, right? Because the way we can say that these things have always been there is because of existentialism, you know? When a fraternity brother, or friend or whomever, gets high and they're like, the world, that is like a very small dose of like existentialism, of like
Mm-hmm.
being in the present and like dealing with one's self-existence. And what ends up happening now is like that that's happening and also not happening at the same rate, where people are skimming across the surface of like who they are, identity wise, and they're seeing images of things and want to become those images. If we look at um like if we look at like dating apps, for instance, right? It's like it's game like dating apps are like gamified, like Robinhood is gamified. So the same brain that's supposed to like help you, you know, solve like a deep like derivatives trade, is the same brain that's like trying to like you is that's being gamified
Mm-hmm.
for selection, of some of like you're shopping, and in that space, I think is really odd, and I think it's always been there, but in different ways. Like I think people are just starting to come to terms with the fact that like you there has to be another model
Mm-hmm.
to exist in the world. We can see like non-binary people and trans people, in the world, living lives very openly, through social media, and we can like we are one confronted, right? Like as like normative, people in some capacity. But then what's also occurring is like they're able to be the entire selves, and we're on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what a lot is what's starting to occur is people is realizing that like it's not all what we've been told, like there's different channels now, like especially like television was the only channel, that we got information from. Now there's TV, there's like thousands of channels now. Then there's social media, which is like so deep and so vast and so personal. And then there's Twitter, which is just like a whole different other, you know, like it's just the First Amendment in act form almost. And it's
Hmm.
just like there's so many ways to be now, but which is also great, but then there's also like a hindrance because it's like you have to choose. And people usually don't choose themselves, right? They usually choose what they see. And I think that's what's the problem is. Like people are not
Hmm.
spending enough time with themselves and being honest. Like that's why I became an artist, was like it afforded me to be honest, like painfully honest about
Hmm.
my existence, my personal existence. And hopefully it touches everybody
Right.
simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. You made, going back to the analogy of the arm and finding the right outlet to provide support. Um,
Yeah.
we need to find the right outlet, and some of it's going to therapy and have that level. Do you think another outlet? I know the fraternity as a whole has been working for this and providing resources, but do you think when we say, hey, one of the ways that you can help address your concerns as a young adult, mental health awareness and challenges, you say, hey, the fraternity is a great place to go for support. Talk a little bit about, I think most people are like, what are you talking about? That's something that people wouldn't align with providing support in mental health. But I know
Yeah.
that you're passionate about the fraternity, and obviously you've had brothers that you've spoken with and everything else. So talk about the fraternity and the Greek system, maybe as a whole, to be a resource um, to understand, address, and feel comfortable with mental health.
Yeah, I think I've always thought institutions are very important. Even as a kid, I thought institutions were very important. I was having a discussion with some folks yesterday about libraries and like how they're like places of work, deep work,
Mhm.
and how people like the work from home thing is starting to happen. How those spaces, like that's just like a capitalistic version of a library, right? It's like one kind of
Right.
work, stuff, blah blah blah. But the institution of the fraternity, if we go back to the beginning of the fraternity, right? It was like these like men in rooms like talking about the world. It was supposed to be like almost a forum of like a place for like putting like things into the world. Also, it's just like this is what we're gonna do, and we have these values, and we can stick together. And then after that, I think around what the early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, with like the GI Bill, people started going to college at like very large rates, and some of those guys were war guys, and then those war guys, the army guys, were going into these fraternities and saying, keeping their brotherhood still alive and using just a different container, right?
Right.
The institution of the like military industrial complex was then slid over into the Greek life system, which is like it has the same kind of foundation of like men working for the same thing, sticking together. Like maybe XYZ infantry is also part of this fraternity, which makes it more accessible to those people. And it says like, oh, like that infantry is in that Signu, right? Or those like Air Force guys are in Fiji, or those like Navy SEALs are in Sekai. So people were able to find one another in that capacity. So for me, that's how I thought about it. And I think the kind of brotherhood that is obtained now, is a lot different than those times because those guys were a lot older. They were like 20 something, and the amount of trauma they like accrued, to go to war was so
Mhm.
large that they stuck together, and when we look at the fraternity system, it's still about that. It's what like for me, like the Greek life system is about having an entire support system built into your life single-handedly. And do you have to earn that? I mean, yeah, you do. Like you have to like pay your dues. But do you also like get like a house, a house that you can walk into at any time of day? Yes. Do you get like social events? Absolutely. Do you get like a study group whenever you need it? Absolutely. Are there so many different people that you normally wouldn't have contact with normally in that space? Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think that's going to be the like because I think also like the shadow conversation that I'm having or we're having about the fraternity system and brotherhood is about where's the fraternity going to go in the like 21st century, because like after this year and these events, it's gonna have to pivot into something way more like, at least in perception wise, accessible to people.
Mhm.
So I think it still works. I still believe in institutions. I mean, I still believe in Fiji. Like I always will, because when I when my mom moved away, I had nowhere to go back to in Chicago. My dad lived in a studio, and I couldn't sleep there. And my grandmother and my aunt lived together. I didn't want to sleep on her couch. And I went to my fraternity brother, Reed Roos, who's like out in Colorado now. And he's actually like, he was my pledge dad as well.
Mhm.
And I was like, yo, like, can I stay in the house? He was like, yo, there's no heat, and we're not supposed to. You gotta watch out for Jeff, the Mal brothers. But if you do, you can stay in my bed, and there's like a heated blanket. You can stay there. And yeah, like, but if I listen to like this kind of the overarching liberal leaning rhetoric of like what I'm told, but what I've experienced are very different.
Mhm.
And that's just how I've always operated, where like I don't really care for what I've been told. I'm not a theorist, I'm a practitioner. So I think the fraternity is very much like it can be something, but it's going to have to confront itself eventually.
Yeah. So two-part question here, right? I like the two-parters, so you can pick one or the other, or take them both, right? So what support programs, right? So you've talked a lot about the fraternity and how the Greek life and the analogies of war, and not the fraternity as a war, but the bonds that were created
Yeah.
outside of that. But what support programs would have been helpful for you? And my second question is, what advice would you give an undergraduate chapter and some brothers that have identified a need, or see some brothers that are like, we need to provide support to these guys. So what advice would you give an undergrad to address it? Like, how would they get started with a program or resources to support their brothers? And
Yeah.
then the second question, I guess, which is the first one, is what programs would you have liked to have seen at University of Iowa? So I don't know if
Yeah.
those two questions make sense or not, but that's would get good perspective. Would
Right.
be great perspective from you.
When it really comes down to it, I think what when it really comes down to it, what I think we needed more than anything is not a fixer or a helper, but we kind of always needed a lawyer, you know? And like not a lawyer in the traditional sense of like they know the law, but someone who's older, not an advisor, who's job or like a purple legionnaire who's there to take care of us and make sure we don't mess up, but someone who's like really agnostic or like really not part of the fraternity or the university, that can be like, we needed an uncle, you know, more than anything. Like we all have that uncle who tells you all the things that you're not supposed to know, but he's very honest with you. And
Mhm.
I think that kind of figure is super important in Greek life, because it's no BS usually. The uncles always no BS. And it's very hard to be no BS in a room of 140 dudes at the same age. Like, who's going to listen to you? But there
Mhm.
has to be someone there who can like step in and be like, this is how these things work, and this is how you have to go forward. And when something goes wrong, you can go to that person rather than the purple legionnaire who's going to look down on you, because the purple legionnaire functions more as a father. And then the fraternity brothers who are younger are like the children, right? He's more of a shepherd. He's trying to corral, trying to maintain the land. He's like, making sure things are yielding well, things of that nature. But to have like an individual who's like part of the university, part of the fraternity, but also, removed in like a direction, is super important, because a lot of times when these kids, and I say kids, like, because like when they get there, they're like 17, 18 years old. What they're experiencing is freedom,
Mhm.
and they don't know which direction to grow in, and like it's hard to go to another 17, 18-year-old and be like, which way should I grow? It's like you can't do that, because like if I keep using the analogy of a tree, the container of the fraternity, if it doesn't have any resistance it won't strengthen, and it needs to like confront itself. And I keep saying confront itself because that's like the reality of it. It's like there needs to be a bit more care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has to be some people you can talk to. And you know, I was that I tried to be that guy as best I could in the fraternity. Like I was the guy who broke all the bad news. You know, when someone got hurt at formal in another fraternity, you know, I stood up and I was like, I'll take this. You know, optically, you know,
Mm-hmm.
me being always real, that it would come across as like serious. You know, like who's
Mm-hmm.
going to be real in the room. But also, I think you know, services like not just like more low-key services around mental health, but just fraternity specific. I think are very important because the kids in the fraternities are going through something the general population isn't necessarily going through.
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it's a different, it's you know, it's like it's like joining a country club at a very young age because there's legacy involved, there's capital involved, there's an unspoken etiquette that is involved, and I think some of that needs to be like a direct line to something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the advice I give to them is you know, you can't you can't be short-term focused all the time. You know, like yeah, like it's fun to like party and all that stuff. It's like do you want to be cool at, you know, 20 or do you want to be cool at 40?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like that was always my viewpoint. Like my viewpoint was always like what how if I can keep this chapter alive through, you know, my cabinet position and on, then I can be a resource to the fraternity going forward. But
Mm-hmm.
in the short term, if the fraternity gets kicked off underneath like my quote unquote administration, why would the fraternity ever listen to me again?
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the approach I took, which is like, you know, yeah, I'm an artist and I'm critical and I'm black and all these things, but like it's my fraternity. You know, it's our fraternity, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like, you know, like whatever, you know, like whatever agenda, you know, the opposing side has. Like I don't really care what they have to say, but I know I want to keep my system, the thing I experience, alive and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only kind of advice I would really give is like y'all have to be honest. Like y'all as in like the younger brothers and like us as like graduate brothers is like we have to be honest and like tackle these things head on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think going forward, accessibility into the Greek life system is going to be like really, really important because
Right.
people are going to want to find more of a space to be in something more real. Like going to college is real, but being in a fraternity is like a way different understanding. Like I know a lot of people who are like they regret not rushing,
Mm-hmm.
and like at least if people rush and they find out. But for me, my whole thing was like, you know, I guess the other thing I would say about Rush and things like that is like we have to find ways for like good brothers who can't afford it to get in, you
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
that's I think that's the most important piece because like for me, coming from where I came from, like I had to pull like strings and stuff with the university so I can be in Fiji, um, to be a GAM. So I think that's really important. So like, how can we internationally or HQ wise and with each chapter be like, all right, who's our list of our guys who we want to put into this fraternity, we can't afford it
Mm-hmm.
because you know we can because the barrier to entry is already kind of high, to get in. But at this point, I'm kind of blabbing. I'm just trying to like keep us alive, right? Like, I just have
Yeah.
some ideas, and I'm like, Erica's on the call. Like, let me drop my like Erica,
Yeah.
let's talk after this and like keep it going. You know?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. You know, there are two things that jumped out at me whenever you said this, and one was right out of the gate, and I think it's almost contradictory to what men in general try to do is fix things, right? And then if I have a brother or somebody that's having struggles, my initial take is I need to fix this. I need to fix him. I need to fix the situation. And
Right.
sometimes there is no fix. It's listening and understanding and just being there for the brothers. And then the other piece that I liked what you said is that there's a lot of advisors in the fraternity, the Purple Legionnaire, the BCA, that are there to help you with what are you doing for a scholarship? What are you doing for philanthropy? What are you doing to get involved with campus? And those are very tangible things. But I love the fact that you got to find the uncle that's not trying to better the fraternity, but better the men to some degree whenever they're having questions, challenges, or uncertainties in their life. So by all stretch, goal is not to fix anything, it's to listen and to have, and the second piece was to have that advisor out there that's not so focused on scholarship and all the metrics that we're often judged by. So I really like those two.
Well, yeah, I mean, Doug, I think that an interesting thing to say is like the metrics are like what we believe in when it comes to perception, right? The metrics is our way of saying, okay, whatever you may heard about us, our GPA is high though, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a way to do that. But I think what it really comes down to is like who's gonna be there, you know, like who's gonna maintain, you know, like I think House Corp overall does a good job. And I think, you know, there's a hierarchy of Greek life as well, you know, like the Southern chapters over the Northern chapters, or the East
Mm-hmm.
Coast chapters over the Western chapters. And I think that kind of under like the ingrained political nature of being in a fraternity, like there's a lot of that. But I think at a certain point, we have to move toward like the uncle model, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like how are we going to confront like Trump Jr. being in the fraternity? Like I really don't care like what anyone's political standing is like we're going to have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the fraternity tilts too far right, then it's like, oh, okay, like is this just going to be like for these kind of people, or is it going to be about men, right? You know, men of all kinds. And I think that's where a lot of like the things I think about what the fraternity is going to like be understood, because the idea of the fraternity is amazing, but actually it becoming like into fruition is like the hardest part. Because you know, everyone knows like Bama's like the house, you know, it's like the house, you know, and like what like how do we get Ball State to be one of the best chapters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I think about. Like I don't care about Bama. Like yeah, like Nick Saban wins a bunch of games and they got a big house, but like, you know, what we gonna do for like Ball State, you know? Like
Right.
how can we give them resources outside of a house to make them competitive? You
Right.
know, and competitive not only um in academics, but alumni. Like I think we should only be thinking in alumni ways a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can get the advisors, like you said, I think one of the things that the fraternity consistently does and does a pretty good job is outreach to graduates, right? When there's two things, and then I'm going to get off track on this one a little bit. There's two things I saw, in my personal opinion, when I traveled around as a field secretary, two things that were consistent on every chapter, whether it was Ball State, Alabama, East Coast, West Coast, is senior leadership in the chapter, meaning guys in the junior and senior years that are engaged, and graduate support and leadership. And if you insert those two things, regardless of the school, regardless of the size, regardless of the geography, you're going to have a successful chapter. And you know, we strive to try to accomplish those goals. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you,
Okay.
Sonnie, because we want to learn about you as well. It's been a great discussion. But as we said in the beginning, you know, you have a Master of Fine Arts degree from Penn. And, you know, that kind of raises, I got to sit up a little straighter when I hear something like that. But, you know, I know that, you know, writer, director, you know, artist, things of that nature. So in all the things that you've been involved with in the fine arts aspect of your life, what's been the proudest accomplishment as an artist that you've come across in the last couple of years?
Yeah. My I guess my gauge for good art for a long art, it's as if it touches like regular people. You know, like that's probably like kind of like weird to say and like kind of coded. But in the art world, it's a very like you know, like nebulous place. It's very elitist. It's very classist in a lot of different ways. But my largest accomplishment was probably finishing grad school. It was incredibly difficult. Like I left University of Iowa and went directly to University of Pennsylvania. You know, like, and then I learned about these ideas of the coastal elite, you know, which I didn't think pertained to me. like as an artist, as a person from Chicago, like in the city. But then I got there, I was like, oh, like they think of everybody this way. And they kind of took, this I like me as a working class person, not as serious.
Mhm.
Um, and this is not just at school, but this is like my coastal um like formation, like as I'm forming this coastal body,
Mhm.
while being there and learning all these things, I was like, wait, like, yeah, I'm an artist, but who am I talking to? And I feel like a lot of the people in the art world are only talking to themselves. And I
Mhm.
don't care about that. And for me, I got out personally. Like, I'm a consultant now. Like, I'm a hospitality consultant. I work like with Excel all the time and I also make art. But for me, I didn't like the one thing the fraternity told me is like you you have to be very sure of who you want to align yourself with. Very, very sure who you want to align yourself with. And like if you're not replacing yourself constantly, and not only like replacing yourself for like an institution or like something like that, like if you're not choosing the right partner, if you're not choosing, the right business partner, if you're not choosing the right friends or the right resources, like the whole house can fall apart.
Mhm.
And being in the art world, I learned that, who I make work for are like, people in my fraternity, and then like, I joke about Bama, but like making art at University of Pennsylvania that I hope relates to a person that goes to University of Alabama, and University of Wyoming is really important to me.
Mhm.
And like the reason why I enjoyed Iowa so much was the fact that the urban condition in Chicago was very similar to rural condition in 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 the flyover or in the farm belt. And it was just the same thing. It's just like, okay, well, there's a brain drain occurring to the city. And then there's like an inability for urban people to get out or inner city people to get out of their positions. And my
Mhm.
whole thing was like, oh, this is a class. This isn't even racial. This is a class thing. Like these people are of the same working class, they can't get out. And I
Mhm.
guess going to, get this MFA at Penn, it made me realize that, I can still wear Carhartt and be a little intellectual and wear clear frame glasses,
Right.
but then still advocate for these people,
Mhm.
and that was a really bizarre realization for me because like in America, like things are so racial and like things are racial and things are racist.
Mhm.
But the thing that always bothered me growing up was class. Like I always knew I was black. I was like, all right, I don't really care about being black. It's like whatever, like cool, like okay. But the thing that always made some weird sense to me was like how people were treated class wise, like the middle class, like, or the working class farm kid, and me being who I am from like, the families from the inner city, we always saw eye to eye in a very particular way because we're just deeply Midwestern in a certain way. So yeah, I think, finishing grad school and learning that, I can advocate for those people and like I still defend them to this day. I'm like the
Mhm.
people of Iowa have always been great to me.
Right.
Like they may ask me some weird questions, about being black, but that's just curiosity. It's a very like working class mentality. Like, what's going on over there? Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Why are they protesting? And it's like, oh, okay. Like he's not being condescending, you know? Like, why would you do such thing? It's genuinely why. And I
Yeah.
think it allowed me to take a closer look at people I believe I'm more like, even though I don't look like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we like to have a parting shot just in our last couple of minutes, and always end with, what advice you've been through a lot of different things, but what advice would you give your 20-year-old Phi Gam self as you look back and you're like, okay, here's my opportunity, all the things we've discussed today and your experiences. Give us a quick snippet of what advice would you give a Phi Gam coming into the Greek system and our fraternity. And doesn't have to be fraternity specific. It just could be a life,
Yeah.
life perspective or whatever. So I don't want to have you go down a wormhole or anything, but what advice? You're sitting here, 20-year-old kids. What do you got?
Yeah, honestly, I think girls and parties will always be there. You like what you're doing now in that fraternity or like in that university is
Mhm.
about your last name. It's about your last name. It's about who you want to be, the legacy you want to leave. And it's not a game. It's not a joke. You know, you want to be like the guy who like sits down one day and he's like, "Hey, like college was so amazing." Like, do you really want to be that guy? You know, like be like, "Man, those were the days." You know, I'm trying to be 50 and be like, "Wow, like I'm just getting started." You know, like that's how I always say try to view my life. It's like, okay, like that was cool, but we can do more. We can definitely do more and like to take care of yourself. But like, yeah, girls and parties will always be there. I mean, it's good to have support and it's good to have like a girlfriend and stuff like that. But if it's not making you better, then what are you really doing? You know?
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely good advice. So Sonny, I know people, with all the things that you're involved with, I know you have a website. If somebody's like, hey, I really like what Sonny has to say. I want to see what his artwork looks like. I want to try to tap into some of the
Yeah.
films he's produced. How do they find you?
Uh Honestly, like I'm on Instagram. So it's my name, Sonnie Wooden, Sonnie
Mhm.
Wooden on Instagram. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. If you're a brother, I'll just add you. It doesn't like I don't even think twice about it. Unless they're like not if they don't even try to like point out that they're like a gam, I'm like, can you at least do that much? I mean, it's
Right.
like don't be that entitled. Like just be like, make sure it's known that you're a gam or like send a message,
Yeah.
or like it doesn't have to be that much. But when it comes down to like my art making things, it's sonnie1.com, which is SONNIEONE.com. Yeah, it's a yeah, I just make art. I make art for regular people. And when I say regular people, I mean, people who want to be excited, when they have a day off. And sometimes, you want to impress, some girl or some guy that you're with, and you want to be like, all right, check this out. That's really what I make it for. I
Yeah.
make art for the like people who want to go on dates, or
Yeah.
like around like 10 o'clock when you're just chilling, want to talk about some like crazy like art philosophy stuff and you know
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, I'm always around. Like I'm always available for like brothers. More importantly, like brothers for sure.
Yeah.
I think I've had I picked up guys in my car and they picked me up and we're crying in the car because life is hard. So if you need an ear, if you need a shoulder, like just let me know.
Yeah.
Ooh, my allergies.
Well, Sonny, your perspective today was good, right? It wasn't preachy, and you really kind of understood what's going on. And I can't thank you enough for participating and engaging. I know it was an easy conversation. We're like, hey, Sonny, we're doing this thing called On the Banks. Are you interested? Before I could even finish the sentence, you said, heck yeah, I'm in. So I can't thank you enough
Yeah.
for participating. And I'd like to thank all the brothers for joining us today um, with On the Banks. We look forward to seeing you again next time, again, where we'll meet brothers, share stories and the values of our fraternity. So until next time, mighty proud to be a Fiji. Thanks, Sonny.
Damn proud.